In today's video, I'll be revealing the hidden psychological traps that keep financially secure retirees feeling anxious and uncertain, and why having $1.2 million in the bank doesn't automatically translate into retirement confidence and fulfillment. Through working with hundreds of retirees who have more than enough money on paper, I discovered that financial abundance alone rarely creates the peace of mind that most people seek, and that invisible mental and planning barriers often prevent even millionaires from truly enjoying their golden years. And that's exactly why I'm making this video today, to show you the 3 specific traps that keep financially secure retirees feeling stuck despite their wealth, and why those psychological barriers often prove more powerful than the financial ones. And then, of course, some practical steps on how to break free from them so that you can actually enjoy the retirement that you've worked so hard to build. If you're new to the channel, my name is Ben Brandt. I've been a financial advisor for almost 20 years, and I'm here to make your retirement even better. If you've saved $1.2 million at age 60, congratulations, you are a rare breed. You're not average. In fact, you are in the top tier of retirement savers. Now, depending on the study that you look at, that puts you roughly in the top 10% of accumulators in the country, meaning that you've outsaved 90% of your peers. And you didn't get there by accident. I know that you had to save early, make sacrifices, delay gratification, and as Liam Neeson might say in the movie Taken, you had to acquire a very particular set of skills. But here's the catch. The very skills that got you here, extreme saving, self-denial, discipline, those can actually work against you once you retire. Saving for 40 years literally rewires your brain for accumulation. Decumulation, spending down what you saved, that can feel like losing money, even when it's part of a perfectly healthy retirement plan. And that's why so many millionaires live like they're poor, even when they have more than enough. Their retirement ends up being smaller, with more friction, and just less joyful than it could be otherwise. And the result, well, they often die with most of their money unspent, sacrificing the very experiences that they could have afforded, all because of the fear of running out of money outweighed their desire for a fun retirement. But here's the good news. What got you here, learning new skills, is the same muscle that you need to flex to break out of this rut. The skill to learn now is how to spend confidently. That starts with small commitments of time, money, and energy, ideally before you even retire. Try the things out that you think you're going to spend time or money on. Go take a golf lesson, sign up for a cooking class, test little things out, learn some Spanish before you go on a trip to Spain. Every experiment will provide us with good data, even if it proves that you don't like something, because that means you won't waste any money or time on it later. Remember, retirement isn't just about avoiding the first big risk, which is running out of money. For many super savers, the bigger risk is actually the second one that nobody talks about, and that's dying with regret. So your first step to avoid the scarcity spiral is this: practice spending and living now, so that when retirement comes, you're ready to enjoy the wealth that you've worked so hard to accumulate. This scarcity spiral creates huge psychological barriers, but there's another problem, one that comes from the numbers themselves: structural blind spots in planning that create unnecessary vulnerability. Most people with a couple $1 million at age 60 make the mistake in thinking in rigid terms. Ideas like, well, the 4% rule says I can only spend about $48,000 a year. But here's the reality. Retirement cash flow is not smooth. It's very lumpy. And whether you're single or married, your retirement cash flow will go through 5 to 10 changes in the first decade of retirement alone. Think about it. If we have a phased retirement, we could have retirement A for spouse A, retirement B for spouse B, the end of your phased retirement for spouse A or spouse B, Medicare A, Medicare B, if there's 2 spouses, mortgage payoff date, and then Social Security A and Social Security B. Now, again, if you're single, you could probably cut those in half, but that's, 5, 10 or more changes. And each of those changes is a cash flow change, either up or down. And of course, the 4% rule really can't account for any of that. The 4% rule is linear, right? You start at 4% of your portfolio value, and then you adjust for inflation every year. Even the most straightforward retirement plan is going to have lumpy cash flows. And we really need a plan that can adapt to that and then be flexible enough to take advantage of planning opportunities. Because here's what happens. People cling to rigid rules. They look at their $1.2 million and say, well, 4% really isn't enough to cover my lifestyle, so I'm going to turn on Social Security early. And by doing so, they lock in that permanently smaller benefit forever. Now, that feels safe in the moment, but that can also backfire because now you're not spending enough from your portfolio early on, which makes your portfolio grow faster. Sounds really good until required minimum distributions kick in later, forcing you to take more income than you need and triggering higher taxes. Smart retirees take a slightly modified approach. They map out their cash flows in a spreadsheet, and they accept that sometimes they'll spend more than the 4% rule for a short period, maybe 6 to 8% per year early on, knowing that when Social Security or Medicare kicks in or that mortgage payoff kicks in, their portfolio drawdowns can then decrease accordingly, right? Think about it like borrowing money from your future self, that future cash flow from Social Security, so that you can enjoy more in your 60s when you're active and healthy. Then, if you naturally spend less in your 70s and 80s, that's when those guaranteed income sources are stronger and lifestyle expenses might taper off a little bit, right? Best of both worlds. Rigid rules can create blind spots. Dynamic planning creates options, which then in turn creates freedom. So the scarcity spiral creates psychological barriers. Structural blind spots create financial vulnerability. But perhaps the most profound retirement trap isn't financial at all, and that's the identity vacuum. Because retirement really lacks two things, purpose and structure. And at first, you're not going to notice, right? You're going to be in what researchers call the honeymoon phase. There's no alarm clocks, grocery shopping on Tuesday mornings when the store is completely empty, and maybe even catching old reruns of People's Court. That freedom feels amazing. But studies show that this phase only lasts maybe 6 to 18 months. And then the glow fades, right? And without purpose and structure, many retirees fall into the disillusionment phase. That's where we second guess the decision to retire in the first place. And we start to wonder, is this all there is? That's why identity is so important. Because think about it, when you meet somebody new, what's one of the first questions they ask? What do you do? Well, when you retire, what's your answer going to be? Saying I'm retired isn't really an identity, it's just a stage of life. The risk is ending up in what I call hanging out in death's waiting room, passing time without truly living. So here's the challenge. Identify the components of your work life that give you fulfillment. Was it collaborating as part of a team or completing projects, mentoring younger colleagues, or maybe it's just the recognition of a job well done? Those specific elements, not the job title in and of itself, are what you need to rebuild in retirement. Because if you don't intentionally identify and then recreate those experiences in retirement, you're not going to just stumble upon them by accident. And that's how retirees end up feeling lost, even if they've got $1 million or $2 in the bank. Entrepreneur coach Dan Sullivan once said that retirement means to be put out of service, like we're retiring a farm implement. While that's a pretty harsh view, I think there is some truth in it. Retirees who thrive are the ones who stay in service. And that can mean a lot of things. That could be volunteering, mentoring, creating, or simply being a part of something that's bigger than themselves. So as you approach retirement, start asking yourself a few questions. Where will I get my sense of achievement? Where will I get recognition and encouragement? Where can I find social connection? And where can I contribute and be valuable? Answering those questions as early as we can ensures that your retirement is more than leisure. Of course, we want a lot of time for that, but in addition to that, we can make our retirements even better through keeping the parts of our career that we like the most and find the most meaningful. So now that you understand some of these retirement traps, book a call with me by clicking the link in the description, and we'll talk about your situation to determine how we can plan for your dream retirement, no matter what your current situation is. Now, let's talk a little bit about one of the most surprising retirement challenges, and it's going to sound strange, but it is spending your own money. Now, if you're 60 years old with $1.2 million saved, you've already proven that you can do the hard part, saving and sacrificing consistently. But unless you learn to flip the switch in your brain from saving to spending, you risk staying stuck in that scarcity mode. And that's how you can end up with a multi-million-dollar portfolio and still feel trapped. And nobody wants to be the retirement version of Scrooge McDuck, right? Sitting on a pile of money, counting coins, but never actually enjoying life or making memories with loved ones. So how do you break that scarcity spiral? Well, you need a framework that rewires your brain from saver to spender without guilt. And here's how it works. And I promise you've never seen or heard anything like this from any other retirement YouTuber. Step number 1 is to gather data. Think back over the last year or two. What's one thing that you spent money on that genuinely brought you joy? Was it a trip? Was it helping out a family member or a hobby, or maybe just upgrading something in your life like a car? Whatever it is, write that number down because that's going to be our starting point. It sounds strange, but stick with me. Step number 2 is to triple that number on paper. And here's why this step matters so much. While you're working, there were constraints, 2 big ones, and our imagination was bound by them. So we're bound by our wage, right? Even if we're a high earner, our income had a ceiling. And because we're saving aggressively for retirement, below that ceiling, we're even living on less because we're saving for retirement. We're also bound by time, right? Work is 5 days a week. Maybe it's 40 or 50 hours a week. That's all spoken for. So your discretionary spending had to fit inside of nights and weekends and short vacations. So that was the lens that you used to make every spending decision. But now retirement flips that completely on its head, right? We're retired. We're no longer wage bound. Our paycheck comes from our portfolio and whatever guaranteed income sources we've built over time, like Social Security or pensions. And in many cases, that income is going to be more flexible and maybe even bigger than your old paycheck ever was. Even better, we are no longer time bound, right? Your calendar isn't ruled by an employer. In fact, that weekend getaway that you liked so much, we can now stretch that into a 3-week adventure. And that's why we can't just copy and paste our old spending habits into our brand new retirement. They're built with a completely different set of rules. You need new data. So here's the exercise. Whatever you spent on something you enjoyed while working, write that down and triple it. Not to be reckless, but to push your imagination to open up to new possibilities. So I'll give you some examples. Hotel stays for a vacation. If you spent $100 a night at a Holiday Inn, imagine what $300 a night could look like. Maybe it's a boutique hotel, maybe it's a bed and breakfast, maybe it's renting an RV. Who knows what it could be? Car rental. If you spent $500 on an economy car for the week, if you had to spend $1,500, what are some things that you could do? Luxury SUV, renting an RV, who knows what it could be? Vacations. You like to spend a week at the lake, it costs $2,000. What would $6,000 look like if you had to spend it? Same thing with dining. $100 at IHOP becomes $300 at a steakhouse, right? You have to use your imagination to spend this money on paper. Hobbies. If you spent $200 on golf for the summer, what could we do with $600, right? Maybe it's lessons, maybe it's a better course membership. Now, you don't actually have to spend this money yet. This is an exercise just on paper. We're brainstorming, but what it does is it breaks your brain out of the what I could afford while I was working and shifts us into the what I can choose to afford now that I'm financially independent. And then step 3, just sort your reactions, right? Look at your expanded list and rate each item hot, lukewarm, or cold. Hot would be, I'd love to explore that. That seems like a great idea. Let's go test it out. Lukewarm is, I don't know if I'd like that or not. We'll test it. And then cold is a non-starter. And even cold, even crossing those things off your list, that's valuable. That's good data. You're learning what matters and what doesn't matter. And of course, as a friendly reminder, something we often say in our office, if you don't fly first class, your kids will. So here's the breakthrough. The goal to this is not reckless spending. The goal is intentional enjoyment, right? We want to spend our money in a way that makes us feel good, makes memories, and it doesn't come with guilt or second guessing. When you practice this framework over time, you start to rewire some of those frugal circuits that got us here into abundant circuits that will carry us forward into the future. You stop feeling like every expense is the meter on the taxi getting more and more expensive, and instead start experiencing the freedom that you saved up all this money for in the first place. So that's how we break that scarcity spiral, by giving ourselves permission to actually enjoy the money that we've worked so hard to save. But that's only one part of the equation. The next trap is structural. Blind spots in your plan that can leave you vulnerable even if you've got a lot of money saved. So let's talk about how we can fix it. Here's what I mean. You've saved up $1.2 million, and that feels like security, but the reality is blind spots in your plan can make that number feel a lot smaller than it looks on paper. And when we sense those blind spots, even if it's not something that we can specifically name, we end up feeling afraid to spend. So how do we fix this? Well, I think the best way is to create contingency plans. So instead of hoping everything goes smoothly, we can plan for what-if scenarios ahead of time. That way, no matter what happens, you've given yourself more than one opportunity to be correct. So I'll show you 3 ways that you could implement this for yourself today. So the first thing we want to think about is portfolio contingencies. Now, a lot of retirees just check the box with one bond fund and call that good. The problem is if interest rates spike or crash, you're basically making a single bet with maybe 40% of your portfolio. Instead, I like to spread that risk across the entire bond spectrum, which is going to be money market, short-term, intermediate-term, and long-term government and corporate bonds at 7 types total. Why? Well, because if interest rates rise quickly, we'll be really happy we have short-term bonds and cash. If rates fall quickly, well, then your long-term bonds could deliver something like stock-like returns for a short amount of time. You've covered both ends of the spectrum, which gives you more chances to be right and less chances to be trapped. Second is income contingencies. That's where those retirement income guardrails come in. They help you spend more confidently than like the old 4% rule. But they harness flexibility to adjust for the lumpy cash flows that we talked about in retirement and the ability to dial back our income temporarily when the market gets uncooperative. So here's what it would look like in a numbers version. Let's say your portfolio is $1.2 million today and you want to take $10,000 a month. Well, if our portfolio drops below $9,000, that's where we can trigger a decision. And instead of painting yourself into the corner with just one rigid rule, we give ourselves multiple options to be right. We decide all these in advance. Option A, I want to dial back my withdrawals for a short amount of time, maybe from $10,000 a month to $9,000 until the market recovers. Option B, maybe you want to claim Social Security earlier than planned, right? I wanted to wait until 70. Maybe I'll start at 69, or I'll turn on my spouse's benefit that's smaller. I'll do that first. Or option C, I want to trim my lifestyle temporarily. I'll go on one less vacation. I'll spend, 1 month less as a snowbird. But because you decided these things ahead of time before you're in the midst of a crisis, well, then you're not panicking. You're just simply following the plan that you laid out ahead of time. And that kind of pre-decided flexibility actually increases your confidence in retirement, and that makes you feel less trapped. And then third, this is a really interesting one, healthcare contingencies around long-term care insurance. This is really the elephant in the room that stops even the wealthiest retirees from spending the way that they might want to because it keeps them up at night. Now, with long-term care, some people will need it and spend $500,000. Other people won't need it at all. And that what if is what keeps people from spending today. Of course, insurance is an option, but at $5,000 to $10,000 a year in premiums, sometimes it creates more stress than it solves. Instead, I encourage people to match that liability with an unassigned asset. In this case, I'm talking about their house. Here's the logic. Research locally what costs might be. Let's say it's $10,000 a month. Well, the average stay is 2.5 to 3 years. We'll call that $360,000. Step 2, compare that number to your home's value. If your house is worth $400,000, well, then essentially you're self-insured because over time, your home value will probably keep pace with that potential liability. If you ever need it, well, there's several ways to tap your home equity. If one spouse needs care, we could look at a HELOC or a reverse mortgage that would cover the long-term care costs while the other spouse stays in the home. If you both need care, well, hey, we can sell the house. And selling the house is tax preferential because we get up to $500,000 of gains excluded if we're a married couple, half of that if we're single. And even using IRA withdrawals for care can be tax-friendly since much of it might count as a deductible medical expense. If that's the case, maybe your IRA could pay for the nursing home while your home equity covers other costs. The point is, once you match that unknown liability with the asset that is your home, you can thaw out dollars frozen in your portfolio for an event that, for all we know, might not ever happen. So removing that long-term care what if and giving that fear a place to live on your balance sheet, that's going to unlock a lot more freedom to spend confidently. And when you stack all these things together, right, portfolio contingencies, income guardrails, healthcare contingencies, you go from blind spots that can create a lot of fear and paralysis to a plan that exudes confidence. And that's what makes a $1 million retirement feel like freedom instead of feeling like a trap. So now that you've seen how contingencies can take the fear out of blind spots, let's talk about one more thing, and that's that money alone can't guarantee our success. Even with the right financial structures, if you don't fill the gap that work used to provide, you still might feel trapped. And that brings us to the third invisible trap, and that's the identity vacuum. So think about it like this. Retirement doesn't just hand you purpose, you've got to go create it. And the best time to start that is while you're still working. So we want to take time to note what are parts of my job that give me energy and what are parts that drain me. Because that's going to give you clues about what we want to carry forward into retirement and what we'd just as soon leave behind. So for example, maybe it wasn't the spreadsheets that you love, it was mentoring younger coworkers. Or maybe it wasn't all the corporate meetings that could have just been an email, but the teamwork, right? Identifying those little pieces now, it makes it easier to recreate them in the future. And then we layer in structure. Humans need anchor points throughout their week. And that could be volunteering on Wednesdays or golfing on Fridays or mentoring a small group every other Monday. Without that rhythm, days can really blur together, and that's when people really start feeling stuck. But with the right guardrails on your money and a clear vision for your purpose, that $1.2 million can unlock the retirement that you actually dreamed about, not one filled with fear or second guessing. If you'd like me to walk you through how this applies to your situation, click the link in the description and book a call with me. We'll map out both the numbers and the non-financial side so you can step into retirement with confidence. So that's what I've got for you this week. My name is Ben. I hope this video made your retirement even better. If it did, drop us a like and we will see you in the next video.